All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. I'm your host, JK, and we are kicking off episode number, I believe this is 219 of the Help Me Understand podcast. Today, we are going to talk about my perspective and some questions that I want you to ask yourself before starting something new, switching to a new book, changing your workout program, starting a new diet, whatever the case may be. So this one is for my program hoppers, my book hoppers. This one's for you. All right, before getting into today's episode, first, I want to, as always, say thank you for choosing to press play on Help Me Understand. You have no shortage of podcasts that you can listen to and possibly even watch if you're on YouTube watching this particular episode. So I truly never take it for granted that you chose to press play on Help Me Understand. And last, before getting into today's topic, Help Me Understand is sponsored by Feed Your Habits. Go to feedyourhabits.com to check out casual lifestyle apparel for those that believe that habits don't just grow on their own, they get fed. If you go to feedyourhabits.com, you'll find t-shirts, crop tops, tanks, hoodies, crew necks, all sorts of casual apparel. Again, for folks that believe that habits don't grow on their own, they get fed. Put in my code, JKFYH, that's all caps, JKFYH at checkout at feedyourhabits.com. That will get you 10% off plus free shipping in the United States. All right, so with that, let's get into today's topic. So first, I want to share a quick recent example that really inspired this particular topic. So I am an avid book reader. I would say that as I was growing up, it was something that was regularly part of my routine. The two series that really stick out, and if you are of a certain age bracket, you are totally going to know what I'm talking about. Encyclopedia Brown, and then the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. Those things were classics and staples, and I'm pretty certain that I read every Encyclopedia Brown book that there was to read at the time. So, avid reader as I was growing up. And then I would say as I got out of high school, where there was required reading inside of some of my English classes and language arts or whatever it was called at the time. As I got out of high school in 96, then my interest and commitment to reading slowly disintegrated to nothing. So if I was reading, it was pretty much magazines. And I would say that it stayed that way probably until about my mid to late 20s, I would say. So let's say more like late 20s. So really picked the reading bug back up and got really involved in a lot of the self-development, personal growth, all the things underneath the Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy. I don't think Les Brown was part of that at the time. Jim Collins, Good to Great, all that good stuff. So I was heavily into that space as I was advancing my career in the retail industry, and also growing up in a household where my mom was and still is a very avid reader. I mean, we have books upon books upon books. I remember like in our living room, we had like 2 or 3 different bookcases, and they were always stocked with different books and things like that. John Grisham really sticks out. And then my dad also really picked up a lot of the self-development and leadership subject matter from pulling stuff, whether he knew it or not, from his bookshelf too. So all that to say, basically grew up reading a lot of books, then stepped away from it, then gained it back, and then stepped away from it a bit. And where I really picked it back up was back in late 2019 going into 2020 when I did 75 Hard. And part of that particular program, one of the tasks that you must complete every day for 75 days without fail is to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book focused on some form of self-development. And that is where I re-engaged my love for reading, especially my love for reading things about self-development, self-help, personal growth, business growth, all that good stuff. And I really have not ever put it back down since then. Now, I certainly won't say that every single day without fail since finishing that program for the first time back in 2020, I've never missed a day of reading 10 pages. That's certainly not the case. However, I can confidently say that reading is now part of my daily rhythm, or my weekly rhythm, I should say. So it's where, back to the topic. So where this idea for this particular topic came from most recently is that I went out and I got a new book. And I am definitely that person who will start reading a book and get about halfway through, or maybe, I'm being generous there, maybe a quarter of the way through, and then I'll hear about another book. So I'll go get that book and then tell myself, well, I'll read 10 pages of this one day, and then I'll read 5 pages of this one the other day. And then you've probably seen this movie before and heard this record before, where you end up not balancing both books. You pretty much drop both of them, or pick one up and never pick the other one back up, all this good stuff. So something that I put into place a while back was to ask myself some certain questions before going to get a new book. Is what, and this is something that I'll cover near the end of this particular episode, a couple of things that you can ask yourself before jumping into something new. But I would ask myself, well, one, have I finished the other books that I've already got in the hopper, or sitting on my bookshelf, or sitting on my desk now? And or two, have I taken any time to actually implement any of the information from the previous book? So primarily I'm talking like nonfiction type stuff versus fiction. So for fiction, I've done a couple of those, but not really reading. It's been more the name escape, Audible. That's what I mean. So I've listened to a few Audible books. So this is more relatable for myself, and hopefully some other folks, when it comes to nonfiction, especially like the self-development, self-help, self-growth, whatever it's called, books. So I would just notice that it seemed to me like I was always on the lookout for, okay, let me find something new. Let me find something novel, and pardon the pun, novel, without taking the time to actually implement and soak in the stuff from the previous book. So I want to share a few things with you that are both going to be my personal observations, and then also in working with others through my fitness coaching, we've actually found some very foundational things that aren't specifically related just to books. It's really more wide reaching when it comes to understanding why someone is hopping from program to program, or diet to diet, and things like that. So really, what I want you to take away from this is just kind of thinking through, okay, before you decide that you're going to change direction, go get the new thing, or start something completely different, ask yourself what you've actually completed from the previous thing. All right. So one of the things that I, excuse me, first want to start off with are, some other examples of what we'll call like program hopping, or jumping ship. We'll call it jumping ship. So if you've got this particular pattern, I know I started off where talking about my personal experience with, I always start a new book before I'm finishing the last one. A couple of other very common ones that come into place are starting a new diet, and doing that typically without taking the time to first assess what happened with the last one. Another one that comes into play quite often, especially in my wheelhouse as a fitness coach, is starting a new workout plan, always feeling like there's got to be something new and novel going on with the workout plan before taking the time to truly work through all of the progressions with the old one. And then another example that I jotted down, possible scenario, is potentially looking at, okay, career changes or job changes prior to really taking the time to get an understanding of, have I really explored all of the possible growth opportunities in my current role prior to deciding that this just isn't the role for me, this isn't the job for me, this isn't the company, whatever the case may be. That particular one is one that I have experienced previously, for sure, in a couple of different ways. And I transparently almost hesitated to really even bring that particular example up, because I do know for sure, just based on personal experience, that there are folks that are out there, and you may be somebody listening to this right now, who are in a not great work situation. And I think that sometimes when you are listening to content or talking to someone who is from their point of view or from my point of view, putting up the mirror to ask you the questions of, okay, what have you done with the opportunities that you have at the current place that you're in? I firm believer that sometimes that can come across as some hardcore gaslighting. And especially as somebody who's been in management roles in the leadership space since I was like 19, 20 years old. So we're talking about 25 years in the quote unquote management space. I've brought this up before, and I know a few listeners have reached out to me and totally agree that management and leadership are two very different things. So I am well versed in being able to put the management spin on things, like the company guy spin or the company girl spin on things, to make it seem like that everything is okay, basically. So I'm well versed in being able to do that sort of thing, and that is not what this particular bullet point is intended to do when I talk about this concept of jumping ship. It's a matter of just getting an understanding of what are you currently doing with the opportunities that you have where you are. Okay, so some reasons that I think this pattern of jumping ship can potentially occur. So I would definitely be interested when you listen to this episode. Let me know if any of this is relatable to you, because I jotted down a few reasons why I think this possibly can be something that's occurring. So one would be impatience. So just when it comes down to it, you get impatient. And many times that impatience from my perspective, and also in working with others, comes from a lack of actual realistic understanding of timeframes for when results are supposed to happen. And well, really that'd be like the main one when I drill it back down into, okay, why am I looking for something different? 9 times out of 10, it has come back to having an unrealistic and maybe uninformed expectation of what the outcome or what the result was supposed to be, or when that particular result was going to happen. So I'll use 2 examples. If I use the book example, I may be becoming impatient with a particular book that I'm reading because I felt like, I'm really not learning a whole lot. I feel like at this point, I'm halfway through Atomic Habits and my habits still haven't changed, which is totally ironic. But I'm halfway through this book about habit change and my habits still haven't changed. Well, if I really take the time to go back and assess that, well, habit change doesn't happen overnight. And also, one, you haven't even finished the book, by the way. And 2, you have to give things time to actually implement them to truly figure out, does this work or does this not work? When I think about it from a training program standpoint, impatience definitely can come into play there, because let's say that you are starting an 8-week training block. And in your average 8-week training block, you're going to have what we call progressions, where we are working through, you'll either be able to lift for more weight and or more reps, along with being able to control the movement better. So improved tempo, improved form for sure over an 8-week period, as long as you're following different steps with checking in with videos, or if you're working with a trainer directly, they're able to see exactly what you're doing and you make those tweaks, all that good stuff. Well, let's say you get to week number 4 and you're like, well, I'm not really able to make, significant changes here for this particular hip thrust. I've quote unquote only been able to add about 5 pounds to that particular movement over the last couple of weeks. And you figure, okay, and my glutes, like they're just, I've seen no improvement in my glutes. So it's probably time to switch things up. And we probably need to add some more kickbacks, and we need to, I need to do this. And then I heard about this other thing. And again, that impatience really comes into play because there's not an understanding and a commitment to, okay, how long ideally should this particular process take anyway, in order for me to see the results that I'm looking for, in order for me to notice any sort of a difference. So again, I think that one of the main reasons that this pattern of jumping ship tends to happen is because we have an unrealistic expectation of what is supposed to happen when. So you've got to give things time to actually implement them. The second thing that I came up with as far as why this pattern of jumping ship can happen is we get really, really uncomfortable with the process itself being slow. And this is one that I work with fairly often, where folks will say, yeah, I'm in it for the long game, because that's been like the buzz phrase for a few years now. You're like, in it for the long game, understanding this is a lifelong game. And very often my wheelhouse in the fitness industry, and I'm certainly not trying to make this whole episode about fitness, it's just a big part of what I do. So it's just kind of where we default to, right? So a big part of the avatar that I work with is folks who have previously already done done particular nutrition type strategies. They've already done certain diets. They've already been working out for a while, and just overall feel like they should be seeing and feeling better for the amount of work that they've put in. So they have this kind of layer of history and experience. And one of the very common things is that folks will say, I understand that quick fixes don't work. And I think that there's been a big shift in the translation of what quick fix actually means. So for quite some time, I think that quick fix was seen as 21 days, was seen as 30 days. And I think that now, from my perspective, the quick fix may actually be your 6-week, 8-week, or maybe even 12-week program. Those potentially may be your quick fixes. And an example that I'll use is that in my one-on-one coaching, I offer 3 different time frames when people sign up and or renew. I offer a 3-month, 6-month, or 12-month package to work with me. Now, previously, I used to offer a much shorter package. Like I almost would go month to month, or sometimes do like a 2-month option. And what I found is that more often than not, it takes at least 2 months to really just even get an understanding of what folks' patterns actually are and what sort of rhythms they actually have versus what we may report when we first onboard or intro ourselves into a new process or a new program. So when we talk about this discomfort with slow progress being one of the reasons that we jump ship, we may think, okay, I'm in this, I've committed to this for 1 month, I've committed to this for 2 months, or we might even, in some cases, I've committed to doing this particular thing for 90 days. And then I'm pairing that with expecting that the problem, quote unquote, is going to be fixed within the 90 days. And sometimes that may even be considered the quick fix. So that discomfort with the progress being slow or the process itself being slow, very similar to the first thing that I talk about with being impatient, being linked to an unrealistic expectation of what's supposed to happen when. Same thing when it comes to discomfort with slow progress, is understanding that the long game doesn't mean just longer than the last program that you did. It doesn't mean that if it's you go to 60 days is the long game versus 30 days. Well, I mean, I guess technically, by the numbers, yes, it is. I do understand basic math. So yes, 60 days is longer than 30 days, but that's different than a lifelong game. So saying that you're committed to the long game is not saying that you're committed to the lifelong game. So something that I think can be helpful is to reframe and think about things in terms of milestones. Because when you're committed to something for the rest of your life, and you say that your focus on your health and your fitness is a lifelong game, then cool, that's a lifelong game. And any game that I know has quarters, it has periods, it has phases and segments. So my strong recommendation on this particular one, I wasn't going to get into all the recommendations quite yet, but here we are. My recommendation is, if you are finding that you're jumping ship based on a level of discomfort with how slow the process is going, remind yourself that whatever you're getting into fitness and health wise is something that's a lifelong game, and every game has different segments where you can break that up and assess where things are. If we're talking something like a book, it's probably not quite as deep. It would be more along the lines of what's the subject matter of that particular book and what's the expectation of when you implement those particular things. I think I got a couple more that I have here in why I think this happens, and then we'll move on to some things that I want to talk to you about when it comes to identifying, okay, well, when should you really jump ship. Like sometimes you can realize that like the ship is sinking, it is time to bounce. So one other thing is sometimes there's this illusion that new is always going to equal better, and that's not necessarily the case. The whole like the grass is not always greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it. And that one I have for sure seen play out both with myself and others when it comes to career opportunities and things really related to that, thinking that, okay, well, instead of taking the time to really figure out, okay, have I really like dug down deep to pull everything that I can out of this particular opportunity, I'm just going to bounce to something different because that's just going to be better. Sometimes it can be about really exploring and researching and implementing where you currently are, the book that you're currently reading, the job that you're currently in, the program that you're currently doing, the diet that you're currently doing, to figure out, have I exhausted, for lack of a better way to put it, have I exhausted all of the opportunities and the information and soaked it all in and implemented everything that's currently here for me now? And one of the things that's been helpful for me in order to stop this pattern of jumping ship from one thing to the next in terms of thinking that new equals better is reminding myself, if I take the time to explore all the opportunities that I have here, it will put me in a better position to be much more well informed as I'm exploring the other opportunities elsewhere. So, for example, if I've been dissatisfied in a particular role within a company or just the company in general, and then I'm thinking about moving to another company or moving to another role within that particular organization, I want to make sure that I've exhausted all opportunities where I currently am, because it empowers me to have more information and more confidence when I'm exploring the next opportunity. Because if you picture it like you're digging a deep ditch, which probably not a great analogy if you're talking about your current career, but if I'm digging and I have the ability to go down 20 feet, but I go down 10 feet and I'm just dissatisfied with what I've found so far, then jumping over to a new place to go dig down that also offers me the ability to go down 20 feet, it doesn't mean that that new spot that I'm digging is actually going to be better. I don't know that because I'm always stopping at 10 feet down. I never actually dig further than 10 feet. So sometimes it makes sense to keep digging and figuring out, okay, what's really down there? Like maybe the thing that I'm looking for is down there. And the problem is that I just keep stopping before I get far enough. So new doesn't always equal better, for sure. And then last but certainly not least, and I think that this really encompasses everything underneath the idea or the topic of why this jumping ship tends to happen. And a lot of that can be just a lack of really being honest with myself, or you being honest with yourself about what's currently going on. It can be really, really easy. And I for sure have experienced this before and still tend to fall into this, where looking for something new is really more about distracting myself from addressing the uncomfortable part of what I'm working with right now. So I realize that we've now gone way further deeper and switching to a new book here. However, I do think that this is definitely something that's relatable across multiple disciplines. So when you take the time to really first ask yourself, okay, what's actually truly going on here that has me looking for something different, looking for something quote unquote new, looking for something better? Is it more that I'm like trying to seek something better than what I've currently got? Or is it that I've now reached a point where it's getting really uncomfortable and I don't really want to take the time to implement this particular idea from this book? I don't really want to stick with this particular workout for 3 more weeks to really see what I can pull out of it, because it's just like, quote unquote, I'm bored, whatever it might be. So taking the time to really have that honest reflection to yourself. Okay, so let me finish things out by sharing with you a couple of examples of where I do think it makes sense that, okay, it is time for you to move on to something new. So we've primarily been talking about, if we're talking like career field, we're talking loosely reading a new book. We're talking about a new fitness program or a new diet. Overall, what I've really kind of narrowed it down to is a new approach is definitely necessary if you are experiencing some pretty heavy burnout, and or if you feel like what you're currently doing or the program that you're in is completely out of alignment with the things that truly matter to you the most. And we can most easily phrase that as your values. So we're essentially looking at two main things. You are just completely wiped out and burned out, and or you are finding that the actions that you're taking are in misalignment with the values that you have, your lifestyle, the things that really mean the most to you. Then from my point of view, those are times where it's not jumping ship in terms of just trying to find something better. It's jumping ship to potentially like save your life and your sanity. So that's not to put that lightly, but that's when I think it is time for a new approach. Some other pieces underneath that is you can tell that you have taken some time for honest reflection. You've really been able to look at the data. You've been able to go back and look at your patterns, and you feel like you know that you've genuinely given effort. You've really put forth the effort needed in order to try and get the best results that you can out of the thing or the task that you have currently been working on. So when it comes to like switching to a new book, it's not just because the book itself gets boring or because you're just, well, I just feel like it's not working. Again, I use the example of Atomic Habits. If you quit that book halfway through and you haven't even read the book, and certainly if you haven't read the book, you haven't taken time to implement any sort of tactics and strategies from the book itself, then you really haven't given the genuine effort, because you can't evaluate results with effort that you haven't put in. So if you have done those things though, and you're finding, okay, well, this isn't necessarily my cup of tea, like I've read the book all the way through, implemented some different things, and I'm just finding that those habits are the same, then it probably is time to go ahead and move to something different. Another thing could be that you've done what you needed to do. So it's time to jump ship, or it's time to get off that ship. I guess that one wouldn't necessarily be jumping ship. It'd be like, let's pull that one back into the dock. We're going to work this analogy. Bring that one back to the dock and go ahead and deboard. Is that what it's called? Deboard, because you've done what you needed to do. So you've basically extracted all of the lessons that you need from that current path. You have gotten what you need out of the role that you're in. You've outgrown something. That can definitely happen too, where, you know what? Yes, this particular way of doing things or this particular role certainly served its purpose for quite some time. What I'm now finding though, and this was a conversation I just had with someone recently, what I'm now finding is that regularly with the role that I'm in, the people that are being brought in above me organizationally, like organizational structure wise, it turns out I am being tapped in to consistently train them and being called in to onboard them. And you notice that you're being passed up over and over and over again while still being tapped as the resource to onboard and integrate those people above you, then yeah, you probably at that point have done, welcome to the Help Me Understand podcast, where we don't edit anything out. So you at that point have done what you needed to do. And yeah, that ideally, don't hold me to this for career advice. However, that is probably a sign that it's time for you to move on and it's time for a change. So those are a couple of thoughts that I have on when I think a new approach is possibly necessary. So let's go ahead and finish things out with some actionable steps and some things that I'd like you to challenge yourself on. And first, I want you to just think about the power of consistency and the power of completion. And there's this feeling that you get when you finish something, when you accomplish something, especially when it's something that isn't specific to what it does for other people. It's a matter of you finishing it for yourself. And in the coaching industry, we call it self-efficacy, where you're able to build confidence in your ability to do things, your ability to follow a process and finish it, see it all the way through, and say to yourself, yeah, I did that. So you build your confidence in your own ability to do what you said you were going to do because you said you were going to do it. So that power of completion, and also the power and the satisfaction of the consistency that you built along the way in order to complete the thing. So when I talk about falling in love with the process and really putting energy and engagement into the process itself, that's what I'm talking about, where it comes to, okay, I am super pumped that I completed the thing. And also, it took steps and it took consistency and it took a process in order to complete that thing. So when you put energy into the steps that it takes to complete the thing, then you basically get like a double win. You get like a daily double there, because you get the wins from being consistent and persevering and being resilient through a particular process, and you also get a win because you finish a particular you achieve a particular milestone, whatever the case may be, before moving on to the next thing. So in a training program, finishing out an 8-week block, a 10-week block, a 12-week training block, and being able to understand and see and recognize the results that you achieved after the 12 weeks, fantastic. And also you go back and you can reflect on the different things that you had to put in place in order to stay consistent over that 12-week period. That's one of my favorite things, to be able to look back and really reflect on what it took to get to the particular milestone or the particular finishing point of something. So some questions that I want you to ask yourself as you reflect on this is, what did you learn from the last thing that you tried? Or ask yourself, what did I learn from the last thing that I tried? So this is before jumping to anything else. First, what have I learned from the last thing that I tried? So take some time for honest reflection there. Ask yourself, did I really give it everything that I had available to give? So this is one. Again, when it comes with fitness, when it comes to training, comes to looking into different diets and things like that. And I've done previous episodes on understanding like the alignment of those particular things. I think a lot of it comes down to understanding like what really matters to you in the foundation. Regardless, ask yourself, like, did I really give it the best effort that I could based on what I had available to me? And then ask yourself, am I looking for novelty or am I actually looking for progress? So when we talk about that example that I brought up some time ago with digging down about 10 feet down, and you know that it's something that was reported to be able to go 20 feet down, are you consistently stopping around 10 feet down because you're looking for something to help you get further down? Or are you looking for something just because you always want to stop at 10 feet because you think it's just boring to go beyond that? So ask yourself, am I chasing novelty or am I chasing progress? So before you pivot, finish. That is the thing that I want to throw out to you there. Before you decide that I need to bounce to something else, if at all possible, finish what you started. What that will do is that will empower you with, one, I can see things through to the end. And two, it has you much more well-informed before going into the next potential opportunity, before exploring a different opportunity, because you were able to see the previous process through all the way to the end. So you are able to speak from the full experience versus half of the experience. So that's what I want to leave you with. And surely last, but certainly not least, just understand that growth doesn't always mean that you're going to be experiencing something new. Sometimes it just means that you saw something all the way through. I just created a rhyme. So growth doesn't always mean something new. It can also mean that you're seeing something all the way through. That is a fantastic note to end on, because that's a quote right in itself. That's a bar, as the young folks say. So with that, I want to close out today's episode. If you've stuck around this long, then one, thank you for not jumping ship on this episode and hearing me all the way out. I certainly appreciate it. If you do have comments, questions, feedback, anything that this may have brought up for you, then please reach out. My info is going to be in the show notes. And then you can also leave comments if you are listening to this on Spotify or watching this on YouTube. So with that, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Help Me Understand podcast. Take care, and I'll talk to you next time.